Welcome. We have been expecting you. Yeah, it's that time of year once again, folks. This is Ryunma, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the top 5 most disturbing things from my childhood. Well, the top 5 most disturbing things I'm willing to tell you about anyway. For this list, I'll be counting down the 5 most horrific things I can remember from back when I was a kid. These are some of the things that have taken up residence in my head, even all these years later, and have simply never moved out. Things from which I still somewhat flinch to this day. And a word of warning. What I find / may have found disturbing may not be what you yourself might find disturbing. So this list is based entirely upon my own experiences from way back in the 90s. Now, you ready to get spooky? I know I am. Number 5. Polymorph from Magic the Gathering. Back when I was a kid, our local grocery store was right next to an Osco's Drugs. I think we mostly went there to buy medicine and to get our camera film developed or something. Anyway, as we left the film counter, there was this rotating display case full of booster packs for trading card games. And one particular pack in that display always managed to catch my eye for all the wrong reasons. It was Magic the Gathering, and it was this. This was my first introduction to Magic the Gathering. A screaming, vaguely humanoid rabbit, watching helplessly as its skin and body began to, no doubt painfully, mutate into some new and grotesque form. And this was on the cover. This was on the cover of the pack. Way to turn off any young children passing by, oh Wizards of the Coast. It was only earlier this year when, in preparation for this video, I asked my Magic playing brother about this card after God knows how many years of repressing it. And I'll admit, I have seen far worse by this point in my life, and I suppose they do get some points for their attempt to inject humor with the flavor text. Oh no! Opposable digits! But unfortunately, the damage is done. This card definitely stands out to me because of my childhood, but admittedly it isn't so horrible that I can't rank it any higher than number 5. Number 4. The Doctors, from Eye of the Beholder, The Twilight Zone. Back in the days before everyone had cable via their wireless providers and all that, most people had to make do with 5 or 6 local networks, so there wasn't always much on, and certainly not nearly as much as we have now. Anyway, after school my brother and I used to watch the Disney afternoon stuff and a small handful of live-action sitcoms. Now, I had at least heard of The Twilight Zone by this age, but I don't know if I'd ever actually seen it quite yet. But well, one day, during Full House I think it was, an infomercial came on, hawking the newly remastered full series of The Twilight Zone on VHS. I think it maybe showed a clip of Anthony Fremont from It's a Wonderful Life, because who doesn't know that reference? But then it cut to the big reveal from Eye of the Beholder, where the doctors, who'd been hidden in shadow all episode, suddenly turn around and reveal they're actually these hideous pigs. The worst part about this picture is because it was such a small part of the infomercial, yet it went by so fast that it stuck with me to this day on a very subliminal level. Even now I can barely stand to look at them, but I suppose I have to in order to keep making this Halloween video. And this wasn't even necessarily my first introduction to body horror, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But for right now, this one still Twilight Zone image is at least unsettling enough to earn itself a spot at number 4. Number 3. Gone Fishing, Tales from the Crypt Keeper. Now, as I said in my last entry, there wasn't always something on when you wanted to watch TV back in those days, but there were always Saturday morning cartoons. Saturday morning cartoons. Your place for shows like Beakman's World, Garfield and Friends, and Skeleton Warriors. But At the same time, there was also a show called Tales from the Crypt Keeper, which was an animated spin-off of the infamous Tales from the Crypt, some of which I actually think I might have seen growing up, come to think of it. And I remember, this one episode left me so unsettled that I think I turned it off and didn't even stick around to see the ending. In this one, a kid named Randy spends his days fishing at the lake with his jerk-ass Uncle Ned, who scolds him for reading, pollutes the lake, and doesn't even honor the fish he catches by eating them, opting instead to dump the bodies on the shore and, I guess, let nature carry them back into the lake? Now, all of this doesn't sound so bad, right? Well, look at this! As Randy begins spending more and more time at the lake, he begins to experience more and more bizarre fish-related happenings. From mounted fish apparently coming back to life, to these abominations. Seriously, since when did they start letting H.P. Lovecraft on TV before noon? Now, fish are ugly and alien to us enough as it is, which is not to say I don't think that we might be just as ugly and alien to them. But I've always been a man who prefers everything as it is, so it's always unsettled me when things are where they biologically aren't supposed to be, and vice versa. Take for example this two-headed turtle that was mutated by chemical waste. You don't find that creepy? Really? Please go to the next slide, come on! Now where was I? Oh yeah. Funnily enough though, I remember Skeleton Warriors being just plain good creepy fantasy fun. Probably because all the sword and sorcery stuff helped to ground it in a world I already knew and not much of it was played for creepy stuff or nightmare fuel. And I guess I never had any trouble with those William Wegman sketches on Sesame Street where the dogs have people hands either. I know. Weird, right? Number 2. Impractical Jokes, Shining Time Station. Shining Time Station. A light and carefree live-action PBS series narrated by Ringo Starr and featuring childhood favorite Thomas the Tank Engine. Now what could possibly be so upsetting here? After all, the talking engines are bright and colorful, everything is done in gentle stop motion, and nobody ever dies or even bleeds here. But it wasn't always a shining time at this station, if you'll pardon my crude attempt at a pun. Sometimes, between the episode stories and our trips to the island of Sodor, we went down a little thing called the Anything Tunnel. So called because anything could happen while we were inside it. And the stories that it told us weren't always pleasant. In this particular story, told entirely without words for extra creepiness, a humanoid creature enters an art museum, only for the people in the paintings to blow him raspberries as he passes by. I don't know, just something about the disturbingly realistic raspberry sounds, the disturbingly realistic tongues, the fact that the whole thing's told without words to explain to us just what exactly is going on, and the uneasy thought of just how creepy that would be to witness in real life just tore my little mind to pieces and I think even made me cry out of sheer unease. Yeah, you better, Rod. Hell, I would too. Funnily enough, when PBS eventually did take Shining Time Station off the air, I cried to hear of that too. So much so that my mom wrote off a letter to PBS on my behalf as a fan of theirs, and they sent me back a letter in response, saying something like, Thomas and the conductor and all his friends on the island of Sodor will forever continue their adventures within your heart. Or something like that. Just like how those disturbingly realistic raspberries will forever blow within my subconscious. And number 1, the original Tim Jacobus Goosebumps books. By now, you've probably realized that I both hate and fear terrified creatures undergoing impossible pain. Distorted humanoid faces, and body parts being where they shouldn't be. Now, what do you suppose you'd get if you were to mash all three of those things together? You would get Goosebumps, the multi-million-dollar cash cow of children's horror literature and the bane of my grade school existence. Methinks illustrator Tim Jacobus did too good of a job here. I mean, just look at the disturbingly realistic, terrified faces on the kids from Chicken Chicken and Why I'm Afraid of Bees. And that's on top of the fact that these are human heads on animal bodies. Disturbingly realistic human heads. Children's heads. Look at the creepily skull-like aesthetic on that thing from Curse of Camp Cold Lake. And the granddaddy of them all, the horrific cover of the Horror at Camp Jelly Jam. Just look at that horrible fake smile. That rictus that looks more like some rabid animal baring its teeth at you. Look at those giant, too reflective eyes. This man barely looks human anymore. Even now I can't bear to... Oh no. Oh! Okay. I'm okay. I'm just gonna calm down and go to my happy place. Ah! I said happy place, not slappy place. And speaking of which, not even the TV series was safe from scaring me. You'd think that the bad acting and cheesy special effects would work against it, but you'd be wrong. Lately, I've been watching some of the episodes on Netflix, and a lot of those that aren't too kiddie are actually pretty good. Really? It's kind of sad that Tim Jacobus' art was just so good, because otherwise I would have gladly read these books, along with everyone else in my grade, and wound up having some real fun with them. Rather than visibly flinching away in horror every time I saw them, and winding up tormented with them by my classmates. I mean, thank God for the new releases with the much less terrifying artwork. But I can remember having seen at least short clips from the end of one of the Living Dummy sequel episodes, and that I do 100% regret. Polymorph and The Twilight Zone may have been my first serious exposures to body horror, but Goosebumps was probably my first exposure to the uncanny valley. This is a phenomenon where people start becoming more and more uncomfortable with non-human images or objects the more closely they start to resemble an actual human being. Now, I'm not usually afraid of dolls or puppets because they always seem to look just silly enough or just cartoony enough that no one in their right mind would ever mistake them for a real human being. I mean, Slappy does not look like anything that naturally occurs in nature. But Mary Ellen, the titular bride of the living dummy, looks just enough like some whacked-out Tim Burton Toddlers and Tiaras princesses to give me the absolute willies. I mean, look how big her eyes are. Eyes that big would have to distort the size of your skull if they were real. And the horrible fate of possessed Harrison at the end of the episode? Big, glassy, googly eyes do not belong on living creatures. That right there is the uncanny valley at some of its worst. So yeah, I was pretty much the only grade school kid in the 90s who didn't read the Goosebumps books. But something began to occur to me now that I'm an adult. During the making of this video, I reluctantly began digging through the bowels of the internet to find images of all 62 of the original Goosebumps covers. And of those 62, only about a quarter of them do I find actually scary, or at least unsettling. 17 of them, in fact. 17 out of 62. That's like 27.5%. Less than half of them. I guess some of this could be chalked up to me only being a kid at the time, or more likely, because I'd seen the covers of the more disturbing ones more often. I guess my lizard brain had started instantly registering all the other ones as scary, whether they actually were or not, as kind of a preemptive defense. The movie was pretty fun, though. Bog standard Nickelodeon fare, but at least it wasn't horrible. And note that I only mentioned the one movie, because any idiot could see that Haunted Halloween was never more than anything but a naked cash grab, piggybacking on the success of the first one. So yeah, the Goosebumps books were the #1 most disturbing thing from my childhood. This has been Ryunma, and if you'd like to see more of my videos, just click that subscribe button below and have yourselves a happy Halloween. Boy, that video was not easy to make. Well, at least it's over now. Oh, holy, no it isn't. My God, what is that thing? God damn you, Tim Jacobus. This video's over. Goodbye.